Well, what a busy day in the world of Ipswich Town, Stu. We're still at Wimbledon. It's half-time in the women's game. The Ipswich women are beating Wimbledon 1-0 at half-time in that. But we've just watched Ipswich Town's men really comfortably beat Wimbledon in the second part of a double-header, which saw a game at Crystal Palace as well. There's so much to talk about.
Should we start with the men's game here first? 3-0, very comfortable. Sam Morsey at the double. Skipper really led by example today. He scored the goal in the first half, crisp, low finish from the edge of the box, and they were 1-0 up at half-time, and it reminded me a lot of some of the deficiencies of last season. Ipswich fully in control, keeping the opposition miles away from their goal, never looked in threat, but you just wanted a bit more forward thrust and cutting edge, and I think McKenna gave them that message at half-time, and to be fair, they stepped up a gear in the second half and got a couple more.
Yeah, the first goal of that second half was Tyrese John Jules. That's his first in an Ipswich shirt, which is great to see. Connor Chaplin made that. That's drive and force, like you mentioned there. He kind of tricked his way, bundled his way at times, but just kept going and made his way into the box. Tempted to go around the keeper, but then he squared for quite a nice finish in the end from John Jules, who I quite liked watching today. And then Sam Morsey's put in a lob from 40 yards. He enjoyed that as well. Just a little wag of the finger, I think, in celebration to that. 2 for him. And like you say, Ipswich fully in control. I don't think we'll see possession stats from this game, but it would be incredibly high. Incredibly high. But what I really liked is that they had a lot of the ball, but they made sure that they used it to move forwards, not just to have a lot of the ball. I think Morsey takes a lot of the credit for that. Just driving forwards, they ate up the space in front of them and made sure that possession was being used in a good area, which is what you wanted really in a game like this.
Yeah, I thought that probably the biggest talking point from this game was the formation. Actually, it was we keep wondering if it's going to be the 3-4-3 of last season, or if we might, as we saw in the first game at Needham Market, see more of a back four this season, back to the Paul Cook favoured 4-2-3-1. I thought it was more of that today. Kieran McKenna is very reluctant to put any kind of numbers on formation. It's all about being flexible in and out of position, being versatile, but that looked more like a back four to me today here. Notably, Wes Burns was part of the squad that went to Palace, which we'll talk about in a minute. So you just wonder whether that kind of back three system is kind of built quite heavily around that Wes Burns specialist wing-back role, and on the days he's not available, whether they'll look at something a little bit different, I don't know. Right, let's rewind a couple of hours before this game. Crystal Palace. Unfortunately, we weren't allowed to be there. It was behind closed doors at Palace's training ground, but we did watch it on a stream in a coffee shop just a mile or so down the road from here, and a surprise at how strong Palace went, really. We had Zaha, we had Benteke, we had
Eze. Schlupp, a little bit of Schlupp, and that's a result of kind of COVID vaccination rules in Singapore, which is where most of Crystal Palace is supposed to be, but a fair amount of them at their Beckenham training ground, and it meant a really solid test for Ipswich, which in the early running of it feared that they weren't going to be up for necessarily. Two down within 11 minutes, both scored by Luke Plunge. But despite having a few issues in the final third, when Palace were really threatening, they were pretty clinical. But Ipswich found a footing in that game and had some really nice spells in it, particularly in possession rather than out of it. And they can come away from that with their heads held high after what was a 4-2 loss in the end. But there was a bit of a golfing class in certain areas of that game.
Plunge is fun to say, isn't it? Much like Schlupp earlier, Luke Plunge. He scored a hat-trick. Palace were 2-0 up inside 11 minutes, quick-fire double. Benteke assisted him both times, and you're thinking, a bit of Premier League quality here. They sived through Ipswich a few times with some eye-of-the-needle through balls, but Ipswich responded really well. I thought they had some really nice passages of play in the first half, plenty of attempts and efforts on goal. It ultimately then went 4-0 down as Palace's cutting edge showed, but stuck with it, kept to the task and pulled a couple of goals back. Dominic Ball headed home from an Aluko free kick.
So can I stop you? Goal from a set piece, Stu?
Yeah. klaxon.
Don't talk about those very often as the sprinkler starts to get us here. It's quite nice.
And then Aluko added one himself after the ball sort of fell to him nicely in the box and he just curled home. So I think there's a lot that Ipswich can take from that. The word that McKenna used discussing that game is resilience, and we've built this pre-season programme to build some resilience into the players. They've now played Arsenal at their training ground, lost 5-1 in that game. A narrow 2-1 defeat to West Ham in midweek at Portman Road, where there was lots of positives to take, and I think some good lessons to be taken from that Palace game earlier. We can't really run you through both teams right now off the top of our head, but it was a first team in both games. I don't think there's much to read into how the teams were split. Edmondson, Jackson, Dominic Ball played at Palace, players that have all got a real strong chance of lining up against Bolton on July the 30th. And then I guess marginally stronger team here today with Morsey, Evans, Wolfenden, Ladapo up front. But I don't think we can read too much into the split, can we?
No, I don't think so. I think you had to play a strong side against Crystal Palace. Ipswich knew what they were going to be getting. They weren't taken by surprise that these Premier League season players were there. And McKenna spoke after the game here about how he picked a team there based on players that he thinks really needed that challenge, and that's quite a nice position to be in on a day like this. You kind of pick your horse for your course and try and get as much as you possibly can out of 180 minutes of football. He used 29 players over the course of the last 4 or 5 hours, which to get that, he'd have been really pleased to get so much football into all of his players there, and many of them tested in different ways. So I think he'll probably head home on the bus tonight pretty tired after his busy day. He dashed between the two, but pretty pleased actually with what he's managed to achieve with his players today.
29 players used. Another one in the door late last night at 11 o'clock. Marcus Harness added from Portsmouth. He may well make his Blues debut, inverted commas, when Ipswich go to the Den to take on Championship club Millwall. So we've seen them comfortably beat League Two opposition today. We've seen them come up a little short against Premier League opposition. Let's see how they fare against Millwall. That I think gives us a really good indication what sort of shape they're in ahead of the big kick-off.